Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for today's event, Step-by-Step Guide to Flawless UI Delivery with Cloud-Based Visual Testing. Today's speaker is Greg Sypolt. Greg is a senior engineer at Gannett USA today, responsible for test automation solutions, test coverage from unit to end-to-end, and continuous integration across all Gannett US Today network products. Over the last 2 years, Greg has helped change the testing approach from manual to automated testing across several products at Gannett USA today and has in-depth knowledge about product development and deployment processes as well as testing strategies and tools. For the Q&A session at the end, Greg will be joined by Neil Manvar, Solution Architect at Sauce Labs, and Adam Karmi, CTO of Applitools. Okay, so I think that we have mostly everyone here. Greg, I think that we can kick off. The stage is yours. Greg, are you there? Because we can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Excellent. Hello, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. Greg Sypolt, engineer. A lot of people don't know what Gannett is, and so it's the parent company of hundreds of newspaper organizations around the United States. And so today, I'm going to kind of talk about our journey of trying to enable visual testing into a lot of our applications from desktop, mobile, and other pieces that could be a good piece for us. And so if you want to, you can also follow me on Twitter at Greg Sypolt. So the takeaways from this session today is you'll kind of learn some of the basics of setting up your first visual test using some of your existing, Selenium testing frameworks, or maybe you're doing some with mobile with Appium or Espresso or XCUI tests. So there's many ways how to enable this visual test. You're going to also learn how to integrate these visual tests with Sauce Labs, and then I'll also demonstrate how you will ensure that you got some cross-browser or some cross-device, compatibility by using kind of Sauce Labs infrastructure. At the end, we'll analyze those results and how it allows us to gain a faster approach of understanding what's failing and what's passing. So why do we need visual checkpoints? Well, a long time ago, manual testing, visual validation was took for granted as you was manually testing your applications. And as we moved, forward with automated testing, these visual validations kind of quickly fade away in the background because your end-to-end tests were really focusing around going from end to end, going through element to element. But it wasn't really checking that visual aspect of the application. So now with Applitools, we're able to validate those UI components, again, by creating automated tests with visual checkpoints using some of the existing testing frameworks like Selenium, Appium, Espresso, and many more. But without these visual inspections, we're kind of in the dark. And there's no way to really know that a UI component is broken when a developer commits a UI change by using our existing automated test today. And so we need to be proactive and continue to seek ways to move faster and keep up with these changes to ensure that we're building in those quality checkpoints into a mobile application or even a browser application. So I think now is a time with Applitools we can stop pushing those unintended visual bugs to production, and it stops that affecting our users. And so Applitools is just an automated visual testing solution that allows us to validate all those visual aspects of the web or mobile. But before we even start diving into code, I think it starts from day one when you're collaborating and identifying those acceptance tests in meetings with your team. So we use BDD, behavior-driven development, to drive that development and streamline that collaboration. It requires daily collaboration for everyone on the team to identify these acceptance tested tests that are needed to really understand how to build the quality into your application. So now, by using BDD, everybody's thinking about testing up front and not at the end, like in the past when there was manual testing. And I really think that everybody should be thinking about visual testing when they're having these discussions with your team. And before, when you was doing automation, you were just more thinking about trying to find elements on the page and kind of you having more of the user experience of going from point A to point B. But that totally eliminates everything visually. And so you need to start having those conversations. So you need to ask yourself, what is your visual test coverage today in your automated process? Well, the next time you walk into a meeting talking about a user story, or a requirement, you need to understand how to plan your visual testing into your application. And so here's not a complete list of visual checkpoints, but this is a few that we have identified as we started using Applitools today. Our components, appearing in the correct color, shape, position, or size. When you start going mobile first, is it appearing or is it hidden for that component when there's a viewport for a mobile device or a tablet? And then the components that are overlapping with other components. Well, we're using Applitools, you're able to identify those as an actual failure. But I think another piece is UI acceptance. The UI appears correctly across your browser or your mobile devices, so that you might be doing just browser testing or mobile web testing. Maybe it's a native app. So you want to make sure that you have you're compatible with all these different types of devices out there. And most importantly, you don't want to send broken images out to production. For us being a very news media organization, we need to ensure that images are displaying correctly. This last piece is that short. It's the short shelf life. We have a lot of local developers on the newsrooms, and they're developing applications that may only last for a week or 2 weeks. Well, we've started using visual testing for those purposes because the return on investment of developing a Selenium test for 2 weeks is a little bit more overhead. Applitools allows us to enable these visual testing in a very automated process. It's cleaner for us, and we're able to get faster feedback, and we're kind of shifting left. Another piece that's not listed here, we initially started using Applitools for iOS testing. We've had struggles of trying to find test automation frameworks that would work and not be so flaky, and we've had a great success right now with our iOS team by using Applitools to visually test our applications and getting quick feedback to our developers. So enabling Applitools is really simple, and it only takes a few minutes to go create a free account and then understand what automation environment you need to use to enable it. Everybody's kind of using Selenium or Appium or all these tools, and by going out to Applitools resource page, they have tutorials to teach you how to enable this into your testing framework. Today I'm going to kind of walk through how we enable Selenium Ruby with RSpec today. So I'm going to navigate back and forth between some code. So here I'm displaying, this is a Ruby project, and using RSpec, you have a spec_helper file. To really enable Applitools, where I'm highlighting from row 18 to 23, is you need to initialize the eyes, you have to send an API key, and then you get to pick the max level. So there's 4 comparison levels that you can enable with Applitools. So you can do exact, strict, content, and layout. And so here I'm setting my default to layout for this test suite. You can also batch it. So doing batching, it allows you to batch a bunch of tests in a collection. So it's in one group of a test, and I can kind of demonstrate that a little bit later. And when your results come in, everything comes into a batch. So if I have 10 test cases, they're always coming in that same that batch for that time range. And so what we've done is if you see here in line 22, we set a batch ID that can come from Jenkins, or if you're running it locally, it describes a timestamp off your local machine as that unique batch ID. And we're also doing some logging just to help us if anything ever goes wrong, we can easily debug that. So navigate back. So code snippets. So I'm going to kind of now just take an opportunity to now walk through some actual visual tests that we've written using Ruby. There's a couple methods when you start writing these tests. You need to understand your visual validation checkpoints. You have a check window, which would be kind of the whole window screen, and you have where you can test it based on what's in focus right now, or you can force it to actually take a snapshot of the full screen where it scrolls through and takes a bunch of snapshots and then it stitches everything together at the end. And then there's a check region. So a check region is I want to check a particular element on the page, and by using like a class name, or CSS selector, or an ID, we're able to identify a particular region on the page and validate that from a visual side of it. So navigating back over some code, this is a quick example. When you're writing a test and using RSpec, we're using RSpec because we can kind of use a describe and it, behavior-driven development side of it. And so the very first check is on line number 9 here is a check window. We're going to a default, URL, and then we're going to then call eyes.test. What this does is it's initializing the eyes object, and we're here we can send it the app name, we can call it what driver, that would be our Selenium object driver, and then give it an actual test name. And so this test name here is the current test, and it's going to pass in to where this is check windows. And then we're calling the eyes.check window and then giving it a name. So this is actually just taking a screenshot of what's in focus at this point. And then we're going to go to line number 18, and number 18 is about checking a region. Checking this region allows you what I was telling you before is if I scroll down here a little bit, I'm trying to find a region around the actual nav, the navigation at the top of a desktop. And so then I can actually just take a snapshot of the actual nav bar at the very top. And so this here allows us to we can just kind of pinpoint what we actually visually want to check. Other check regions we've done in the past with mobile, we've been doing like if you have kind of the open drawer and other pieces to where you're just trying to find particular components that you want to validate. And after you, at the end here, line number 28, after each test, we want to make sure that we close eyes, and this will notify, Applitools that everything's successful, and it closes everything out. And if you're changing those match levels, like I did in the check region, I want to reset that to the next, to the next test, because if you don't reset that after each test, it's going to stay in the strict mode where I have in line 20 there. So integrating visual tests with sauce is really simple also. And so you can run your Selenium test with visual checkpoints on any browser, any operating system using sauce. But sauce also supports Appium, and they just recently acquired Test Object, which is now called, I think, Sauce Labs remote device in the cloud. And so that will allow you to run on physical devices and also use Applitools to take screenshots on physical devices and on emulators if you're using sauce or browsers. So let's take a few minutes and walk through how we can enable Sauce Labs. into this particular project. Navigating back to my code, we're going to go back into the spec helper. And the way we've written this a little bit is you have to include a particular library. So this we're using the sauce with so we can report our callback status if the test is passed or failed. And then if you scroll down, we built this method that's saying, is sauce set up correctly in this project? Did we pass, a sauce username and then an access key? If it doesn't, it alerts us and it'll abort. But before each test, we're going to, interact with that sauce environment method, and then we're going to also, walking down to line 27 to 34, we're now setting the capabilities. We're passing in what version, platform, browser name, the screen resolution we want to test on. We're applying any type of tags, Selenium version. And so in this line that I'm highlighting is where we're now controlling what environment we want to test on. But you also can see, if you look in line 28, we have built in this application, in this particular framework, we've built to where we can also override that setting when we want to possibly run against different devices and stuff. And I'll show you here in a second how we control different type of profiles when we want to go against different other devices. We also, you'll set where you're setting your browser object to a remote URL and everything, and that's where you're passing in your credentials for sauce, ondemand.saucelabs.com, and this will allow you to start connecting the sauce and actually executing your existing Selenium test and also reporting all your screenshots back to Applitools. Talking about those profiles, if I go to the rake file, so inside here we can control if we want to do parallel testing. This can be overridden from the command line. It can also, we can hard code it based on how many tests we want to run in parallel. This allows us, if we have only 5 tests, we can run 5 tests in parallel at the same time, and we're now able to scale and run faster and get that feedback a little faster rather than just kind of running on one concurrent VM and try and test those 5. Also in here, you'll see the different profiles. Setting a profile is really simple to where we can control if we want to run it on a particular browser version, an operating system, here's Chrome, what resolution. So we can control that by creating all these different profiles, and then if we want to do that cross-browser test, we can now just kind of call these different profiles and then just run a simple command that fires off the cross-browser task. And this allows us to get some cross-browser testing with our existing Selenium test, but also it's taking those visual checkpoints as we're executing those too. So analyzing the results. So there's a couple ways that you can analyze these results as you're kind of getting introduced to visual testing. It's the same as any other automated testing. You have to find a way to analyze those results and pass that feedback to the team. And so we use Jenkins and Applitools dashboard. Jenkins, we have actually plugged it into a couple of our Applitools testing frameworks already, and we're able to check the results. And I'll kind of walk through how we can just go to Jenkins and check those results, or you can kind of just go to Applitools and check them too. So going to my browser. So if I was on a Jenkins server, and this is a particular build for our Android project, and so these are all the visual tests that we have running, and every time it runs, it creates a new build, and that's kind of our batch idea is how this is executed. And on this particular project, we have 72 visual tests that we're running for our Android native app. And it found 4, test failures, and what it's doing here is it's, embedding what you would see in the Applitools dashboard, but this is creating a central location where developers are a little bit more comfortable to where they can come in and check these results and compare stuff. And so we can scroll through this list and see that there's passes, and then we can actually click on an actual failure and then try to understand what actually happened with this. And what it does is it actually will go out and open up this view in Applitools. And so you can see that when we was walking through this visual test that we got a completely different feed. And so now we need to understand, was this intended or not? And so this is where we now have to do some investigation to understand why did we click on an actual photo and somehow we ended up on like the USA Today sports page. So this is a good where it catches it and we can kind of validate to see what went wrong there. So kind of take that to the next level is we can kind of go over to Applitools Eyes. When you log in, you got this dashboard. Very similar to what I just showed you in Jenkins, but now you can kind of control based off of, if you have multiple teams or if you want to kind of, filter through stuff, you can easily filter through the test a little bit easier. So the example I'm showing here is again, what we do is we create a lot of like test automation labs, which is interactive labs that really teach everybody on our team how to write visual test. And so this is today's presentation in a sense is how I'm trying to help teams enable using Applitools using Ruby. And so inside here you can see to where that test I was kind of just showing you, this is an example here where we're taking that nav up above. And so here's a good example when you're doing these type of tests where the weather is constantly changing, and so it creates some noise when you're visually testing. So Applitools has great mechanisms to ignore particular regions if it's not important to you, or you can create these floating regions by just kind of highlighting over and then doing a diff. And then this one here, so one of the things that is very unique about when you're doing visual testing, one of the main challenges is if you're a very dynamic application like news, visual testing can be a little challenging because if you're using production data all the time, it's going to constantly be changing on you. And so you're constantly going to have these kind of false positive, visual errors happening. And so a lot of the things we do with dynamic data is we create static data feeds. To every time we test our application, it's a static feed. And that feed's always going to be the same, but if they ever make a UI change, we'll be able to visually figure out that that change caused an issue with overlapping or they changed some of the fonts and stuff like that. It allows us to have a little bit more robust, automated test, and it allows us to eliminate a lot of that flakiness that can happen when you have a lot of dynamic data like we do. So at USA Today, we have been about 5 months into doing visual testing with Applitools. We have seen some big wins, and currently we have started doing a little bit of Appium with our local news developers that do some like one-off like native apps. Appium is now, we have roughly 3 or 4 tests that run visual tests around the open drawer, and we're seeing great success with that project. I mentioned earlier XCUI test. It's been great for us. It's the only automated testing we're doing right now with iOS, and those have been a really successful story for us because we're getting feedback faster to the developers. We're also using the Espresso SDK, which I just demonstrated there. We have about 74 visual tests that goes along with all of our functional end-to-end tests also. And right now we're currently exploring Nightwatch for some web applications right now. We're trying to move all of our Selenium to JavaScript because I always try to align our automated tech stacks with our application tech stacks. And so in the past we've had a lot of Ruby, which is a different tech stack than a lot of our application stacks. So we're just now evaluating that, and hopefully within the next couple weeks we'll have a couple good success stories, and I'll be out in SauceCon, so if you are interested or using Nightwatch, you want to see how you can actually use Applitools with it, find me at SauceCon, and I can definitely demo a little bit of what we're doing and some of our success stories with it. So that was kind of from what I was kind of demo on how to easily enable and what's on your guys' mind. Bill?
Bill, are you with us? I think that he might be on mute. Greg, are you ready to go into the Q&A session?
Yeah, we can go back in the Q&A if Bill's unable to take over.
Here we go. Sorry, sorry everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, definitely we can hear you.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, Greg, thank you. That was terrific, and we have some questions rolling in right now. So let me start from the top. The first is, can you use Applitools if your testing framework includes Selenium, Webdriver JS, and Nodejs?
Yes, I mean that with Nightwatch today, it's built off of Node.js, and it's using they built this wrap around the Selenium JavaScript bindings today, and so we're currently slowly getting through the growing pains of that, but yeah, it's definitely possible. Okay, thank you. We get a thumbs up from Neil as well. So this is more of a, let me phrase the question, it's in 4 parts. The main purpose of visual testing is to check images only, or can you use Applitools in visual testing to check any element on the page? You can check any element on the page. It's completely up to you what your strategy would be. If you wanted to check, rather than taking a full screenshot, you could walk through and do a bunch of check regions if you wanted to. So if you had, 15 particular IDs, locators on the page you want to validate, you could, completely break that apart if you wanted to.
And this is for text changes as well. Logo placement.
What's that?
Visual testing. You can do text changes, logo placement, just basically any visual element to make sure it's acting as intended. Yeah, you can use Applitools for any visual component that you want to validate. Andrew is asking, where would I find an example of using Applitools in Selenium and Java? Maybe that's. I believe you can go out to Applitools today and go to the resource page, and they have some examples there inside their documentation that allow you to kind of understand how to enable it in Java and how to kind of build it into your existing framework if you want to, or you can kind of completely separate it if you want to also. Okay. Here's related to the last question. Does Applitools work for testing video? Not exactly. Not actually. So video, you can test the components around it, like play, making sure that there's a status bar and things like that. But if you're actually trying to take snapshots of the video, it gets very tricky. That's one area that we have not figured out the best approach using Applitools or anything, and so those are still kind of an exploratory test for us for all of our videos, assets. Okay. I think, for this, for Applitools, is Ruby the only language you need, or can you use Java or any other programming language? You can use any programming language. Any of the Selenium Webdriver bindings, you can enable it. If you go out to Applitools and look under the resources and their tutorials, there's probably about, I'm guessing here, about 30 different tech stacks that you can enable Applitools. So it's pretty much uses every tech stack out there from a UI front-end development
Okay.
Hey guys,
Henry,
Bill, if you don't mind, I'd like to, Bill, excuse me, if it's okay, I'd like to add some information about video testing.
yes, please, go ahead, Adam.
Elaborate on that question. Okay, so basically, it is possible to test video to some extent with the tool. And it is being used by several users of Applitools very successfully. The idea is that you cannot just test any video. The main limitation is that we depend, especially about Selenium, on the get screenshot method, which is not fast enough to capture any given frame. So it has some delays. But the way that you overcome it is that you should place, if you just want to make sure that you have a video and it's playing and the player is working and it's not stuck or something like that, then for your tests, you can actually put in a test video that switches frames slowly. So for example, you can have a video that counts from 1 to 50 and changes a figure every 3 seconds, let's say. Now, in these 3 seconds, you have time to take to do a check window or check region on that video element. Now, what happens is that as long as the video is playing, you'll get matches. And if you get to the end, everything is cool. If the video is slow or if it's stuck, at some point you'll have a mismatch and you know that it's broken. So although it's not 100% coverage, it does give you some automated coverage. Video is working, the server is serving a video, it is playing in the correct order, and it's actually a pretty decent coverage to get with the tool. And of course, we're working on doing some more cool stuff around video. It's on a roadmap and it will come at some time. I hope it helps.
Adam, Neil here from Sauce Labs. Another strategy that could possibly work is if you get to a certain point in your video and you could pause it there and have that as your baseline image. Would that be a possibility as well?
Yeah, you can actually measure. That's another thing. If you know that exactly around, let's say, approximate amount of time, let's say after a minute, there should be a reasonably stable frame that even if you miss by, I don't know, half a second here or there or a few hundred milliseconds, it would still be the same image. Then you can actually pause and then validate it as well. Yeah, but this is something that is theoretical. I never tried it, and I never know of customers who tried it, but the other method does work, that I know.
All right. So we have a few others. Greg, this one asks, you mentioned that you use layout as well as strict match levels. Could you please recap the scenarios where you would use each of the levels?
We've used a lot of this layout and content just because we have a lot of dynamic data, which we've kind of used a static feed. And so we're just making sure that the integrity of the layout is staying intact, and that's enough for us. But there's areas that maybe we're displaying an image and we wanted to go into strict mode. I think the example I showed was I switched it to strict for the navigation bar, and I wanted to make sure that that wasn't shifting so much. But most of our strategy today has been around the actual content and layout, just because we're just wanting to make sure the integrity of the actual USA Today site is laid out correctly, and making sure that things are not overlapping with each other. If you was trying to do strict and you was trying to maybe do more of a region area, then that's where I would use a strict. It's all about what you have kind of built into your strategy, and that's how we're building the strategy of the comparison levels.
Okay. Here's a question. Is Applitools able to check modal or overlays that appear while performing flow testing?
I don't know the answer to that one. Maybe Adam.
Okay, can you repeat the question, Bill? I don't think I understood it.
The question is, can Applitools check modal or overlay elements while performing flow testing?
Okay, so basically Applitools can check everything that you can get as a screenshot. So the answer is yes. Now, if you're working with a certain test automation framework and you ask it for a screenshot and it doesn't include that modal element, then you won't be able to validate that image. But if the test automation system that you are working with and you request a screenshot, it does provide that element, then you can certainly validate it. There's no problem. We also have, we support over 30 SDKs. Some of them even work by directly accessing the graphics card, and it will capture anything that's on the screen, regardless of from what application or even things that the operating system is showing. So you can definitely work with the different SDKs, or depending on your test automation framework, and validate basically anything that you can get a screenshot of.
Okay, thank you. Neil, there's a question here. How can we use Applitools for different devices and different browsers?
Yep. So basically your test automation framework would be configured to run these tests in parallel across all the various browsers, operating systems, devices that you need. And as part of your test, you would call out to Applitools and say check window or verify that this part of the screenshot or the whole page looks as expected. So it's just about crafting the correct test and having your test automation framework run in parallel and spawn all the different various browsers and devices on whatever environment that may be, whether it's Sauce Labs or whatever else.
Okay. And this kind of is a follow-on. Does Applitools only test visual elements here, or can you test functionality? I think that's where we're better together.
Yeah, so I'll take a stab at this. Applitools will do the visual diff testing. The functionality will probably be tested by something like Selenium, which is verifying that you're getting into the appropriate states and then driving the UI and performing visual validation as part of it. But Adam or Greg, feel free to chime in here.
Yeah, you can kind of mix and match the two. You're using Selenium to drive to a particular page. If I need to go through, a whole workflow, to get to that point B, I'm using my existing, end-to-end test to get to that point, and then I'm just initializing Applitools to take a screenshot of what I want to, visually check at that point, and then I just close it out, and then I could continue to walk through using Selenium to get to my next checkpoint if I need to. But we try to keep all of our tests really small, in the sense of it's very modular and they don't take no more than a couple minutes. So you're kind of blending both of them in together.
So
okay.
What I have to add to this answer is that, first of all, the obvious added value that Applitools provide is, on top of Selenium, is the ability to validate the visual aspects. So that's clear. However, the more static your test or deterministic your application is, and by using the strict comparison, you can actually cover huge amounts of functionality as well. So the idea is, and it's much more productive and easy to create the test and maintain them than relying on DOM elements and assertions in Selenium. The reason is simple. Let's say that you have, I don't know, calculator and it says 1 + 1 and it should be 2, right? So if you're validating the entire screen, all of a sudden there's a bug in the calculator logic. Of course, you could find that in a unit test, but regardless, if it would all of a sudden appear as 3, Applitools would highlight that as a difference because it expected a 2 and it became a 3. It has no idea that it's actually something that calculates a result, but still it would capture that because it actually looks for the similar output. Now, the more complex the UI, you can imagine how a single screenshot that captures the entire window consisting of hundreds of UI elements at once, as long as the data is fixed, and for most applications that's the case, you basically get a lot more coverage, functional coverage as well, without using any element locators, without having to write a lot of code, just one line of code that covers all the pieces of functionality that is there on the screen. Now, I can tell you from my own personal experience that our entire UI suite that covers the Applitools application is tested with Applitools. We have 300 tests that cover each and every UI stated functionality of that UI, and we don't have a single assertion in code in Selenium. Of course, there are other tests for the backend and the unit test, but there is even no single locator or assertion in our tests, UI tests. That's it.
Okay. Thank you for that. Adam, this might be one for you as well. Does the site under test need to be accessible by the Applitools servers, or do we just need to send data images to the Applitools servers?
So there is no need for an inbound connection from the Applitools ICE server to your system under test. All that's needed is that the SDK has access to it. And if the SDK runs behind the firewall, then it just sends images outside to the Applitools ICE server. And it's also possible to deploy the server on premise. So if there are problems with even reaching outside the company perimeter, then you can just install an ICE server on premise, and that's it.
Okay. And I'll throw this one out for the team. Can we run Applitools independently? I mean, without integrating with Selenium or other frameworks? Adam, maybe that's one for you.
Okay, so Applitools is basically architected as a server that has an API that just that you can start tests, do visual validation points, and end tests. And the way that you plug it into specific environments is using different SDKs. We have over 30 of them in all the major programming languages. Some just work with images, some are dependent on Selenium, some on Appium, Espresso, XUI, LeanFT, UFT, many others. So basically, it can fit any test automation framework, and it can just be standalone with just images, and it's not dependent on any particular framework.
Okay. We have a specific question about, can we check barcode scan images as well?
I'm assuming if the barcode is going to be the same every time, you could do that.
And I think it's, as long as driver.screenshot returns the barcode image, I think that would be a valid visual validation. So I suspect so as well.
Here's a softball. Is there a trial for Applitools?
Yeah, you can sign up for a free account, and I can't answer how long the free account. I think it's just one concurrent or X amount of screenshots per week. So yes, you can go out, sign up for a free account, start trying to enable Applitools into your existing Selenium tests, or you can kind of create a completely separate test suite, just kind of what I demoed today, and give it a try. I think everybody that's doing automated testing should definitely think about using Applitools, because it does help you validate those visual UI components that are kind of missing in our existing Selenium tests today. So.
Okay. Let's throw out a couple more, and then we'll do a quick wrap. Can manual testers use Applitools?
Yeah, I think it's one of the easiest things. So we have a few manual testers today, and one of the things the manual testers are using from the mobile side is they're kind of checking the notifications that we're sending from Jenkins over that we have had a kind of a visual failure. So they're kind of validating it. Is that a valid failure? And if it is a valid failure, then they're opening up the the actual JIRA ticket. But the other thing is, what my team has really been trying to do is kind of create this kind of a self-service model to where we're building out the testing framework for whatever language, and they can kind of start creating visual tests really quickly. Because if you have everything put out there, and we're trying to build this kind of like test generator, now it's just about what I need to check on the page, and we can easily enable a manual tester to start using Applitools.
Okay. We'll close with this one. In mobile apps where we have maps, how can we benchmark the visual testing while zooming in and zooming out of maps? Considering the locations on the map have items which are dynamically changing.
If it's dynamically changing, that's difficult. I mean, Adam might have some more insight what they're doing for dynamic data around visual testing. My experience right now today, dynamic data that's changing all the time, it's really hard to visually test because it's going to, on too far, and that's one of the reasons why we use a lot of, for the apps, we don't have static heat. That's why we use the layout or content area to make sure that the area around it is all, the integrity is there.
Okay.
Yeah, it could, depending on the dynamic nature of the map and how many really new elements are there all the time, then it could be challenging. One thing that you can try doing is just not looking and validating the entire map, but just searching for maybe some distinct element at the location that you're looking for that is relatively small, and allow it to float around. So basically you want that element to appear. It doesn't really matter what's around it. Of course, if dynamic elements appear on top of it, that won't work for you, but it might give you, it might solve the problem if that doesn't happen.
Okay, that might be worth a worth the presentation. So I want to thank everyone. We do have a slide here, as Greg mentioned. Greg, Adam, Neil, a bunch of other notables in the world of automated testing, Selenium, Appium, continuous delivery, and DevOps are going to be at the first ever Sauce Labs user conference in San Francisco this June 6th through 8th. We've also confirmed that Jason Huggins, Dave Hefner, and Joe Colantonio, while not presenting, are going to be roaming the halls for the hallway track. And if you're interested, Applitools is offering a discount code of $100 on your 2-day conference ticket, and hope that we'll have a chance to see some folks in San Francisco this coming June. So with that, Adi, I'll close out from the Sauce Labs side. Appreciate everyone showing up. We will send out an email following this event with a link to the recording. And I think we've got some additional fodder that will turn into some good blog posts as a follow-up to today's session. Greg, thank you very much. Adam, Neil, Adi, it's been terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope to see you at our next event.
All right, thanks very much.